our virtual luncheons for AZ Water. My name is Kirsten Wansvik. I'm with Stantec, and I am one of the committee chairs from the Tucson luncheon, and Brenda is from the Phoenix luncheon. I'm not sure if she's on yet. And she and Scott, who's also from that committee, and I have been working to put this luncheon series together. There's 6 of these luncheons. So welcome, and this should last about an hour, maybe an hour and 10 minutes from start to finish with announcements and then Q&A and things like that. So at this point, I'm going to turn off my camera and just walk you through some of our announcements and things. So let's see here. There we go. All right, so our next virtual luncheon is December 3rd, and that will be a framework for emergency preparedness planning that will be presented by Daniel Quintanar of Tucson Water. And we've specifically asked Dan to even speak to emergency preparedness during COVID and how things kind of went with that. So I think he's going to put a little bit of a COVID spin on that presentation. So that one will be sponsored by Nino and Moore and Dibble Engineering. So please sign up online and join us for that on December 3rd. Again, Shana is going to send out PDH certificates for everyone who's registered. And if you didn't register, but you are an attendee in some other way, please let her know and she'll get you on the list. And we'll email out those PDHs for this. So in points of interest, this is up on our website. It's alongside every one of the luncheons. So just go to any one of them and you can find this flyer and see the other luncheons that are in this series. We have one scheduled in December, early December, January, February, and March of next year in our 6-speaker circuit here that we're doing, six topics. And at this point, I'll pitch over to Laura Macklin for just a second so she can tell you a little bit of an update on the tour to Tucson and the raising of money, I guess, that we do. So Lauren, go ahead.
Thanks, Kirsten. Hey, everyone. Just a quick update on El Tour this year. It's been postponed, as you probably all know, to April 10th. Of 2021, and we are ahead of last year as far as fundraising. We're ahead as far as riders goes. I know probably some of you know Lisa Melton. She's now the AZ Water Water for People committee chair now, and she's been giving me some help out of Phoenix. So if anybody is interested in riding, knows anybody who wants to ride or wants to sponsor, I'll have my contact information up in the chat and feel free to contact me anytime. I'm going to also send a flyer to Kirsten, so if anybody, if she or Shanna, as a matter of fact, has all of your emails, maybe I'll just send it to her and she can forward it along to you. With that, that's about it. If anybody has any questions, feel free.
And Laura, put your email address or something in the chat, so if people want to email you directly, they can do that too. All right, so thank you again for joining us. We have 2 sponsors today. We have PCL Construction, who is sponsoring this talk. PCL Civil Infrastructure Division in Phoenix has provided clean water to communities across the United States for more than 30 years by building hundreds of water infrastructure projects that include water and wastewater treatment facilities, miles of pipeline, pump stations, and hydraulic dams. And we have Ken Slata on from PCL today. Our other sponsor is Carollo Engineers. Carollo's mission statement is to be the best water consulting firm in the United States through creating innovative, cost-conscious solutions needed to resolve the complex challenges faced by municipal water agencies. Carollo is an environmental engineering firm specializing in the planning, design, and construction of water, wastewater, and reclaimed water facilities and infrastructure. Founded in 1933 from a single office with 3 engineers in Phoenix, Carollo has grown to more than 1,100 people in 48 offices throughout the United States, including local offices in Phoenix, Tucson, and Yuma. We have Corinne Marone on with us today from Carollo. So at this point, I'd like to turn to our sponsor spotlights and hear a little bit more from Ken about PCL.
All right, thank you. And hello, everybody. My name's Ken Slota. I'm a senior construction manager with PCL. So it's a little bit about the company in general. We're 114 years old, quite a large company. So you can see up there our revenue, where we're ranked in the in ENR when it comes to green contractors and whatnot. You can see on the map here, we're actually headquartered up in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, so a Canadian company with our US head office in, in Denver. So we cover typically in these offices both commercial, industrial, and heavy civil. Next slide. So for the heavy civil, this is us here in the mothership at Tempe, Arizona. We're the Civil Infrastructure Division. We've done about $8.5 billion in water infrastructure projects. Our annual volume's right around 200 million there. Within this office, with all of our employees, that's hourly, and our salary employees, we're over 500, and we've been obviously we've been here, oh gosh, probably almost 30 years doing water infrastructure projects. Next slide. So just to highlight a few projects we have going on here. That picture on the right is the Highline Booster Pump Station. That's about 90% complete there. But within pre-construction, we're getting ready to start off on the 91st Avenue Wastewater Treatment Plant Solids Improvement Project. Also at the City of Phoenix, there's a booster pump station at the 24th Street Water Treatment Plant that we're negotiating the final GMP, or going out to hard bid, I should say, for the final GMP. We were just awarded a CMRS with the City of Peoria, the Jomax booster pump station, and one where I'm the design build manager is the Epcor Loop 303 Phase 1 expansion. That's GMP 2 and 3 are currently in pre-construction, and that's the permanent plant there, and we're at 60% design and moving towards 90 to 100%. And within some of our construction projects, first I'll start off with Tucson Water. They'll be speaking here with the well R127A and a TARP improvements project. So this is a facility, the TARP facility we completed back in early 2013. Now we're doing an expansion on that facility, adding a well. We also have a project for the City of Avondale. It's a North Avondale water supply. It's an interconnect with the City of Phoenix to help in drought conditions, to share some water. That same project I just talked about, the Progressive Design Build Loop 303. So we are in GMP 1 right now. We are starting construction with substantial completion at the end of end of this year. Town of Gilbert, we're doing a big booster pump station and a 400 million and a well conversion. Also, that reservoir is a 4 million gallon reservoir. It was a hard bid project, and we're probably about 70% complete. And last but not least is APS Train 3. We've been out at APS for the last, oh gosh, 10 years now, and that was a negotiated GMP. That's a little bit about us, and
Nice.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ken. Appreciate having you. Let's see here. There we go. Oh, and there's your last slide there. Great. So now we'll hear a little bit about Corolla from Corinne.
Thank you, Kirsten. Good morning, everybody. My name is Corinne Marin. I'm the Tucson office manager. Corolla currently maintains 48 offices in 21 states. At Corolla, water is all we do. Our firm is focused exclusively on water and wastewater services. Next slide, please. So here's a map showing our PFAS experience in Arizona, and we have several projects listed over to the right that we're doing in California. So we're the design engineers for the Tucson Water TARP facility and the Marana Water Treatment campuses, which will be discussed further today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Corinne. So now I'd like to introduce our topic for today. We're going to hear about PFAS management, both from Tucson Water and Marana Water. Our speakers are John Kamick, the Tucson Water Deputy Director, and Scott Schladweiler, the Marana Water Director. So a little bit about them. John Kamick is currently a director for the AZ Water Association, past president of Water Reuse Arizona, president of Southern Arizona Water Users Association, and a member of the Governor's Water Augmentation, Innovation, and Conservation Council. Prior to returning to Tucson Water as Deputy Director in 2019, John spent 7 years as the Director of Marana Water. His professional focus is on water quality, resource management, and One Water planning. And then we also have Scott Schladweiler, the Town of Marana Water Director. Scott is the Director of Marana Water and has over 21 years of experience in the design, construction, and operation of public water and wastewater systems. Prior to joining Marana, Scott spent time at Tucson Water as a consultant. Scott is a registered professional engineer in the state of Arizona and has a bachelor's and master's degree in civil engineering from the University of Arizona. And he likes to say, bear down. So with that, I will turn it over first to John and followed by Scott. So welcome and thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kirsten. And
Perfect.
is it up?
It is.
Okay.
It's
Hopefully it's going. There we go. All right.
There you go.
To presentation.
The full screen. Yep.
Excellent. Okay. Hello, everybody. I see most of the participants on the list. Probably 70% of you or more actually have some knowledge and background on what's happening in Tucson and Marana with relation to perfluorinated compounds and other emerging contaminants. For those of you who don't know, like Kirsten said, I'm John Kamik. I'm the Deputy Director of Tucson Water, and I'm going to be talking about what Tucson's struggles have been and where we're going with regards to PFAS management. I am filling in for Jeff Biggs. He's our water administrator who was originally supposed to give this talk, and when he asked me if he can give this talk a couple months ago, of course I said, well, yeah, sure, it makes total sense. You go do that. Unfortunately, I forgot Jeff is already retirement eligible, so when he had a motorcycle trip come up with his brothers in the last week or so, he then came back to me and said, John, I can't give this talk, so you're going to have to do it. So bear with me. I'm going to be using Jeff's presentation here today, but it's all good. I vetted it. He didn't say anything wrong, so everything's going to be a-okay. On that, going back to Tucson Water and what we've been dealing with perfluorinated compounds, actually is a longer story. Back in 1999, the USGS did a focus study on compounds of emerging concern, also focusing on pharmaceuticals in river systems across the United States. And it was during that project of the USGS that they sampled water in the Santa Cruz River. And they compared what they saw from unregulated compounds in the Santa Cruz River with rivers across the country. Well, no surprise, the Santa Cruz River is chock full of pharmaceuticals, other potential endocrine compromising compounds, sweeteners like sucralose, and a whole variety of things. Why? Because it's effluent dependent. We all know that in southern Arizona. It was no shock to any of us. But it was a shock at the national level for people who didn't understand our hydrology down here. By 2002, the USGS then created another project to look at the aquifers directly beneath the Santa Cruz River and other major watersheds across the country. And sure enough, they found similar compounds in the aquifer, again, pharmaceuticals, other strange compounds, which again was no shock because we have an effluent dependent Santa Cruz River that starts at the now Agua Nueva plant, contributed to at the now Tres Rios plant, and then flows through the northwest outside of the city of Tucson into the town of Marana, and at the time up into Pinal County. So it was during these early years in the 2000s that Tucson Water decided to do some monitoring of what we refer to as compounds of emerging concern, using primarily the USGS list that was out there as an initial starting point. But then we segued into using UCMR lists that were coming up and starting to match what the EPA was starting to look at as far as unregulated contaminant monitoring rule compounds. So it was a combination of both. So now we'll go through where we at with respect to PFAS. I can't get it the page down. Huh. There we go. All right, I got to use a button on the screen. Okay, so my presentation outline is going to give a regulatory overview. I kind of just gave you a historical, local overview of how we got to where we're at, or where we'll be talking about, and then, but now I'll give a little regulatory background. We're also going to be talking about the Tucson Airport remediation project.
John, we lost audio. Are you still there? Okay, I think we lost John. Kirsten, do we have a secondary presenter by chance?
We do have Scott on.
Okay.
Is John still? I'm still in the room. He wasn't he?
I believe he just dropped off.
Okay, he may be trying to re-enter. Let's see.
Sorry, everyone, if you can just bear with us for just 1 second, we can let Scott start and then switch back to John if he's able to get back in.
Okay, so is that what you'd like to do, Shana, then?
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to go on mute and see if I can call John, just see if I can help, but.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, we'll give this a shot. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can, and hear you as well.
All right, fantastic. Good morning, everyone. For those of you I don't know, my name is Scott Schleidweiler. I'm the water director here at Marana, and kind of following on what John was getting to eventually here is I think the majority of you looking at the participant list are familiar with what I'm going to talk about, and there's a good chance some of you have seen this presentation before. So those of you on the edge of your sheets, please no spoiler alerts. I have shown this a few times at different events pre-COVID, of course. So what I'm going to kind of walk through is a little background on Marana Water, because I know a lot of folks on the event here are familiar with Marana Water, but a lot aren't as well. I'm going to talk about discovery of PFAS and also 1,4-dioxane, which is something else we're treating for here. A little bit about our public outreach, some of the alternatives we looked at, treatment design, touch on project funding, and then a little bit about where we are today. All right, so a little bit about Marana Water. Marana is located just north of Tucson. We have 7 separate water systems that we operate. They're all geographically isolated from one another. That does play into part of our treatment process and our approach to addressing unregulated compounds. We are still one of the top 5 fastest growing municipalities in all of Arizona. Right now, our population is around 52,000, but we're expected to reach over 75,000 by 2040. So water quality was of utmost importance when we look at development and what impact that might have on future growth in the area. This is another map, very similar to the one you just saw. The blue areas that you see on here are Marana water service areas. The dark blue areas are all of our current water service areas and different water systems. The light blue that you see is kind of what is our intended service area. This is based on some general plan information and where we see growth in the near future. But what I wanted to draw your attention to is if you see the black and white line kind of surrounding the town, these are our town limits. Within this, you see a number of hatched areas. These are all Tucson water service areas. So as it stands today, Tucson Water still serves over 50% of town residents and provides water to them. So there are a lot of areas where we go back and forth quite a bit, and it does get a little confusing on who serves who. Right across the street, your neighbor might be served by Tucson Water, but
you may be served by Marana water. So as we kind of walk through this and walk through some of the communication, this was something that we had to address. Looking at a quick timeline, and I know this is something that many of you have seen before. In 2016, the health advisory for PFOA and PFOS was reduced from 400 to 200 down to 70 parts per trillion combined. In late 2016, Tucson Water had done some sampling up in northwest part of town here, actually in Marana, and they had found concentrations of 1,4-dioxane and perfluorinated compounds above the health advisory. Now, there are a couple areas up here where we have wells, Tucson Water and Marana have wells within a mile of each other. And so we went out, we confirmed and did some of our own sampling, and lo and behold, those concentrations were almost exact. Tucson Water and Metro Water, who also had some wells not too far from where we were, they were able to turn their wells off. We unfortunately were not able to do that. In 2017, just a few weeks later, actually, we confirmed the presence of perfluorinated compounds in some of those same wells. That testing took a little bit longer, so that was actually in January. At that same time, we did contact DEQ, and with a combined effort of Tucson Water, Metro, Marana, we all dropped by DEQ and said, hey, what can you do to help us out? Start looking at possible sources for this, and is there anything from a regulatory standpoint that could eventually help us out. But in the meantime, we also know that we needed to address this on our own end because it wasn't something that was going to happen overnight. So we initiated a water quality assessment and looked at potential solutions to the issues in this area. We wanted to make sure our customers were taken care of and it didn't impact future growth of the town. We go back to the map that I showed you before. You can see the red highlighted areas. These two systems were completely affected by both 1,4-dioxane and perfluorinated compounds. So within these two systems, we had 6 wells in these two systems, all of the wells had concentrations above health advisories for both 1,4-dioxane and perfluorinated compounds. There's one other little red dot that you see up here. That was in another well that was within our system at the time. That has since been transferred to a DWID, and of course, before we did sell that to them, they were fully aware of the water quality concerns there. But between these two systems, we have almost 3,000 customers, 3,000 connections. So this compromised about 35% of our customer base. So this is quite a bit, and within these areas, there's a wide variety of homes. We have some upper end all the way down to starter homes. So there's a lot of families here, a very wide demographic of people that were affected. As I mentioned before, Tucson Water, Metro Water, they were able to shut their wells off, but because we have isolated systems here, we were not. So as of today, we are still serving water with perfluorinated compounds and 1,4-dioxane above the health advisory to these service areas. Just taking a quick look at some of the concentrations in the area, 1,4-dioxane and picture rock. You can see when we first started way back in 2016, we were up 2 to 3 times the health advisory level of 0.35 parts per billion. That has dropped and then kind of leveled off a little bit, floating right around 0.8. As far as perfluorinated compounds in that same area, we started in 80 to 90. These two wells are within about a half mile of each other, and also within about a mile of the 2 Tucson Water wells. We have seen a steady decline in this, which is good. And just for fun, just to show you, Murphy's Law is still effective. Right here, I don't know if you can see my cursor moving. That was about the time we, and this is a spoiler alert, contracted to get design of treatment campuses and stuff moving. But this is the last time we were actually above the health advisory before we move forward with treatment campuses. So that's good to see. This does continue to drop ever so slightly. Airline Lambert water system, very similar numbers, 2 to 3 times the health advisory for 1,4-dioxane. That has remained fairly consistent. We have 4 wells in that area. There's 1 primary well, which is the Swirl Bloom well. 3 smaller wells in there do contribute to that system. Eventually, once treatment campuses are online, Saguaro Bloom is the only well that will be running through that system. And then there was an additional well that a developer is currently constructing that will run through the system as well. PFAS in the area is bumped around a little bit, but still remains on average above the health advisory. So once we found this out, and kind of looking at the front of your graph here at the beginning, late 2016, early 2017, once we figured this out and said, hey, yeah, we have concentrations above the health advisory, the last thing we wanted to do is sit on it and let our customers find out at a later date. So the first thing we did was let everybody know about it. We told them what we knew about it, what we're going to do about it. We sent flyers out to every single customer, even in those areas that weren't affected, because we have people that live in other water systems. They send kids to school in areas that were affected, some that weren't. But once this information went out, obviously media got a hold of this, and this is what started a lot of information going around. We've received hundreds and hundreds of phone calls. I've personally talked to hundreds of people. You know, John, when he was here, was on TV multiple times. We've both been on the radio, newspaper articles. We have realtors calling concerned about property values. So this information, getting it out there, was a good thing. It alerted a lot of folks, and eventually worked in our favor. One of the other things we also did was put together a website. We were able to direct a lot of people to this website. In fact, during a lot of those phone calls, people were asking, what can I do about this? Who can I call? What else is being done beyond you guys? Can I call your regulators? And we had already met with DEQ, and at the time there wasn't much they were doing about it, only because it was still new to them. It was new on their radar. And when they were called actually about it and said, hey, where can I go look? Where can I find more information about this? One of the first things they said is, yeah, go check out Marana Water's website. This is something that was developed in-house. There's a lot of information on here. This is still up and running today. The unregulated compounds page has a lot of frequently asked questions, directs you to fact sheets, all kinds of information. One of the things that's also on there is we post all of our sampling information, so you can log on, type in your address, and it'll post the most recent sampling information that is available for that service area. As I mentioned, there's other information there about the compounds, both this 1,4-dioxane. There's links in here, links in the frequently asked questions. Certainly go ahead, take a peek at this. Whoops. So our next step moving forward, and one of the things that we had promised everybody, is that we're going to figure out what we're going to do. We're going to determine a path forward. And to start that, we implemented an alternatives evaluation implementation plan. So we hired Carollo. We wanted to look at what our options were going to be. Low-hanging fruit was, could we blend? And long story short is, we didn't have the additional capacity. We didn't have the well capacity anywhere within our system or adjacent to do that. And even if we did, we were going to need up to 82% non-detected water just to get down below the health advisory. And that wasn't something that was really possible. We looked at adding additional wells, again, in the areas that we were talking about. That water quality is uncertain because of the data that we are now receiving. We looked at interconnects with other systems. Tucson Water, we have an interconnect with them at our Picture Rock site, but unfortunately their wells were shut off at the time and they didn't have the capacity to help supply it. The Northwest Recharge Recovery and Delivery System project, that's something we're working on with Oro Valley, with Metro Water. This is something that might help out in the future for at least the airline Lambert system, but that's not going to be done until 23, 24. And it's not something that was completely within our control. So we had a number of other entities we were working with, and we wanted to make sure we could do the best thing for our customers. Eventually, we came around treatment alternatives. They're the most feasible, most predictable, and most controllable option on our end. So just a little graph. This was right out of that initial report, looking at conceptual designs and options. And the reason I'm bringing this up is one of the things that, and John has started to allude to it, but everything in Marana everything in the Tucson region flows north, and Marana's on the north end of that. So whether it's stormwater flow, effluent from the treatment facilities, groundwater flow even, it all flows through Marana. So what you see here is a graph, and I know you can't read it all, and that's fine, but all these red dots that you see on here are all wells within, right along the Santa Cruz that are above the health advisories for perfluorinated compounds. Map for 1,4-dioxane looks almost identical, but as you can see, this is right along the aquifer is one of the best locations for getting water. The well yield there is fantastic, but because of the de facto reuse and because of the stormwater flow, anything and everything that drops in Tucson at some point in time, whether or not it's now or later or years before, ends up in the Marana area. So we're on the jumping back to the timeline a little bit. August 2018, we were actually directed by council to pursue treatment. This is after John, our co-presenter here, gave a fantastic presentation to council. You know, council is very adamant that this isn't something that our existing customers had to pay for. They want to take care of them, and again, the town is very focused on growth and knowing that this could impact any future development, any future concerns for people moving to town, either commercial or residential. They want to take care of this right away. This is also something that was unfunded. We had no plan. This was unexpected. So the next step was, okay, how are we going to pay for this? We immediately moved to discussions with WIFA. We had $15 million loan based on the conceptual estimates was approved by WIFA in December of 18. We closed on that in January of 19. I think it was that week, if I'm not mistaken, that we actually had a kickoff meeting with Carollo to begin design on the work. Looking forward to construction, we wanted to make sure that that everything was done on time. We were within budget. This is a very important project, so we elected to move with the construction manager at risk process. So in May of 2019, through a selection process, we hired Archer Western. Just moving forward, October and December, we had two GMPs issued by then, one for long lead items and one for the balance of the construction work. And just keeping with that schedule, the intent was that both campuses would be operational in the fall of 2020, and if I'm not mistaken, fall's in the air, so that should be right around the corner. A couple of the treatment options that we looked at, yes, we did look at reverse osmosis, things like that briefly, but in the initial evaluation, one of the first things we looked at was ion exchange for removal of perfluorinated compounds, followed by UVAOP for destruction of 1,4-dioxane. The other one we targeted was UVAOP and GAC. The advantage to this is there's some reduced tankage, only because we didn't have to have the additional ion exchange. Here we moved UVAOP up front. It took care of the 1,4-dioxane, and as a secondary treatment process, ran through GAC. The GAC has two purposes here. One, quenching hydrogen peroxide, and two, removal of perfluorinated compounds. So ultimately, with the estimated cost of this time was about $15 million for both sites, and we were able to actually look at fitting this into all of our existing sites. So I'll touch on that a little bit, but that was kind of a silver lining for us. As far as targeting water quality, 1,4-dioxane, basically going down the method reporting limit of 0.1 parts per billion. We're basically expecting total destruction on 1,4-dioxane. As far as PFAS goes, as we touched on earlier, you can see the continuous reduction in health advisories from 400 and 270. What we eventually settled on right now is an operational target of 17.5. That's 17.5 parts per trillion. That's combined PFOA, PFOS. We are monitoring a number of other constituents as well with the EPA test method. There's a number of other ones that we are tracking, and so should any regulatory standards be enforced or approved sometime soon, we will have the ability to adjust this either way. But so looking at the Picture Rock site, this is something surrounded right by commercial development. We have a school next door. We have a little park nearby. this is what our original site looks like. It was originally intended to have a secondary storage tank there, but through some operational changes over time, additional booster stations, additional development, that secondary tank through an interconnect is not going to be necessary. So what that meant is we had space on site to do this. And as a secondary, sorry about that, as a secondary bonus for us, this is a centrally operated system, right? So we have 2 wells that pump into this reservoir and pump out through a booster station. So it could have been better in this situation. We could put the plant right on site and everything would be treated prior to entering the distribution system. There's no individual wellhead treatment required. So this is actually what it looks like today. This is from a couple of weeks ago. You can see everything is moving on quite nicely. We have our GAC tanks in, the backwash tank, UV reactors are they're in the building. Another little shot of construction happening. Airline Lambert Treatment Campus, same exact process, just a slightly different layout. In this particular case, our existing site was walled off here, but we actually own the property out to the east. So we were able to knock down the wall and put this in here. With this site, we were able to, nice horseshoe shape, you can get trucks in and out. And then here's what we're looking at today. Another quick shot of construction in action. Everything on that site, with the exception of the building, the tanks, that was all existing. We've had a reservoir out there for years, an existing well that you can see right there in the background. We did have to modify some of the pumps on both Continental Reserve and Saguaro Bloom. So those will be, we swapped out one of the motors and then adjusted some of the flow rates on both of these. This site, we will have an additional well. It's actually has been drilled and we're just waiting on new source testing that was performed by a developer. It will be tied into this site. So we'll have a redundant source of water here of actually slightly greater capacity, which will be outstanding for us. As far as project funding goes, I'm not going to touch a whole lot on this right now, but as I mentioned before, when we initially set out on this, there was no funding available. So we originally looked at options from around town. Could we borrow from other funds? Could we implement a tax right away and kind of pay as we go? Ultimately, we landed as a funding source on WIFA funding. This is something we can do right away at low interest. As far as debt repayment, this is something we're talking about right now. In fact, we were just having discussions with us 2 weeks ago with council on how we're going to do this. So this is still something that's up in the air. More than likely, this will be through sales tax, and whether or not we redistribute some of the sales tax that we already charge or increase the tax to help out with that is yet to be determined. As many of you know, we are a co-plaintiff in the case against 3M with the city of Tucson. This is something that's ongoing. There's no time frame from this. If we do actually see any, or when we do, hopefully, see any repayment or anything from this, there's probably going to be years down the road. So in the meantime, we'll have to pay off the WIFA loan and begin moving forward. We're still keeping up with communication with customers on our website. There's a Project Water tab on there. If you want to click on that, check it out. We do bi-monthly updates on there. It gives a little blurb on what happened that month and maybe some other additional information, maybe a few pictures on there. We have had a lot of customers look at this, even some call and say, hey, you guys are late, or hey, when's the next one coming out? So this is something that's been great for our customers. I do want to give a shout out to Carollo and Archer Western. They've been fantastic partners in this project and working through this. Carollo from day one. George, Jim, Corinne, see you guys on here, Viking, Tim Pudwell, and also Archer Western. They've kept this project on track. Nobody could have foreseen a global pandemic throughout the middle of this, but we're pretty much on schedule, minus a couple of delays with some electrical equipment. But everything's moving forward, and we anticipate treating water hopefully next month is the last I've heard. And finally, just so I don't get get in trouble back here at the office. If you are on Instagram, please check us out. We do have a bunch of other information on these projects. There's drone footage, some voiceovers, other pictures, a lot of information available there. So thank you very much for your time, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Scott. I think we'll hold questions till the end, and we'll just go back to having John Kimmick finish his presentation.
All right, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, and
All
we can
right.
see your screen.
Excellent. Well, that was exciting. Full Wi-Fi shutdown, so it was a little challenging for me. Thank you, Scott, for picking up the ball and running down the field. It was more challenging for the 3 teenagers that came shooting out of their bedrooms because they're in class, wondering what the heck was going on. So that was kind of interesting. But I am back now. Let's just see if I can remember where I was. I think I was going through this outline about what I was going to do. You know, Scott just talked about what's happening downriver of Tucson and kind of how I was building up the story of where we were and where we're going to. So besides the regulatory overview, the description of what's currently happening at the Tucson Airport Remediation Project, I'll talk about some of Tucson Water's current challenges in the potable system, as well as our reclaimed water system. So the regulatory overview, and this is now a current overview. I think Scott kind of touched on how the regulatory changes in 2016 affected Marana water. That's about right when I came back. But what we're looking at, and it affected Tucson water as well, and everybody. What we're looking at though today and moving forward is we do have, as you can see in the upper left-hand corner, the federal health advisory for PFOA and PFOS combined is 70 part per trillion. However, what we know and what other states have been working on is the problem of perfluorinated compounds is not limited to 2 compounds. It's actually a broad suite of multiple compounds that are out there, only 2 of which have the health advisory. However, plenty of others are being detected across the country. And as this chart is showing on this graph, that many states are now moving forward ahead of the EPA in developing either guidance levels, advisory guidance levels for themselves, if they have a large and robust public health department in cooperation with their environmental quality departments, or they're actually coming up with drinking water maximum contaminant limits for not only the 2 that have the advisories, PFOA and PFOS, but in many other compounds as well, like PFBA, PFBS, PFHXS, and others. So since this drinking water regulations are evolving quickly ahead of how the federal drinking water standards are geared, besides these states coming up with their own guidelines, Tucson Water, because of the sensitivity of decades past of discovery of TCE and then later the discovery of 1,4-dioxane, amongst other things, the sensitivity of people, particularly on the south side of Tucson, to anything that is not regulated or and kept within check under the drinking water standards, maximum contaminant level. They're suspicious of it, and rightfully so. There's been a long bad history of the Superfund site down by the airport and unintentional contamination of the drinking water supply in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, which led to the development of the Tucson Airport Remediation Project, as well as other Superfund projects in the area. So that community sensitivity is high. Because of that, Tucson Water has decided to use a lot of these national state regulations and guidance documents to come up with internal operating standards that we are going to hold ourselves to in lieu of the federal MCL program being able to catch up with a lot of these compounds that are out there, perfluorinated compounds. So what are Tucson's operational targets? Well, you can see PFOS and PFOA. We have targets of 7 and 11 part per trillion. Again, this is based on some of the lowest levels that we're seeing coming out of other states across the country. These are not federal guidance levels. These are now state or guidance levels that we're using. We also developed one for PFHXS at 7 as well. That compound, though it is not talked about a lot nationally, it's not the primary two, but it is seen nationally in quite a few places. When we were some of the hearings on the Science Day hearings for the multi-district litigation that the town of Marana and city of Tucson are participating in as plaintiffs is being heard in Charleston, South Carolina right now, along with hundreds of other communities across the country. During that Science Day presentations, there was general acknowledgement that PFHXS acts very similar to PFOS. Similar half-lives of 5 to 7 years, and similar structure as well, and potentially similar toxicological results as well. So Tucson Water is deciding to use 7 as a target value for PFHXS. And there's also another compound out there called PFHPA, which we don't have an individual target of, but we're operating a combined 4 compound target of PFOS, PFOA, PFHXS, PFHPA, not to exceed 18. So you can imagine if the 3 above that have their individual ones are not present, but if it exceeds 18 part per trillion in PFHPA, that is still an exceedance of our operational target. We also see 2 other compounds in the Tucson area, and every community seems to have their own suite of compounds and at varying levels. But the 2 other ones besides the 4 that are above is PFHXA and PFBS. And I believe both those were using the operational targets of the state of Michigan, 200,000 for HXA, and then 420 for PFBS. So these are the 6 that we're using for Tucson and how to manage our well fields, drinking water supply, not to exceed. So the first project, the Tucson Airport Remediation Project, this is a long-standing project. Kind of alluded to it, and most of you know what this is. This is originally a TCE plume down by Tucson International Airport when a lot of defense contracting work was taking place in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. The common volatile that was used for cleaning parts and other things was TCE. We found by 1994, it was already declared a Superfund site. City of Tucson, since they own part of the airport and allowed these activities to be on there, was one of multiple principal responsible parties that were identified to be part of the cleanup of that. So that original 1994 project was to build a plant, and Tucson was going to take care of the plume migration and a lot of the remediation of some of the hotter spots of the plume, which was at the north end as it goes from the south to the north, the plume and the aquifer. There was a combination of 9 remediation wells were built and constructed, 5 in the south plume, 4 in the north for containment. And because we were dealing with TCE, we were using air stripping to release the volatiles out of the water and then for it to be sequestered in granular activated carbon as a vapor. Everything worked great. No real problems during that time until the discovery of 1,4-dioxane came. That happened in 2002. We were asked by EPA. They had other Superfund sites, TCE related Superfund sites similar to the Tucson Airport remediation project across the country, where they were finding this other compound called 1,4-dioxane, and they asked Tucson Water, they was like, hey, can you sample for this in the TARP plume? We suspect it may be there. And sure enough, it was. So now we were dealing with another issue. 1,4-dioxane, as Scott probably alluded to, is another unregulated compound. It actually falls between a semi-volatile and a volatile on the EPA method screening level, so it was not even run on standard analysis. You have to use a modified version of either the volatile or the semi-volatile EPA method to even be able to pick up the 1,4-dioxane compound. By 2010, after balancing our water supply to keep 1,4-dioxane as low as possible entering the distribution system, because the original treatment plant did not treat for this. I forgot to mention that. It was only treating for TCE. Air stripping is not an effective method for 1,4-dioxane removal. So during these years, Tucson Water had to bring in water from what we call our B zone out in Avra Valley, as well as running the wells differently in the TARP remediation project to try to keep 1,4-dioxane levels as low as possible. By 2010, though, we knew we had to build a treatment plant. The community, the sensitive community, like I mentioned, was not happy about the discovery of 1,4-dioxane, was not happy that there was little known about it moving forward. And so the community and our mayor and council wanted us to do something about it, even if we were not required to. And that kind of is what set off everything in the Tucson region as far as treatment for unregulated compounds. By 2011, there was a new health advisory. Our original advisory was 3.5. A new health advisory came out, and they moved the decimal point on us, which made things even more complicated, but basically pushed us into the realm of doing advanced treatment. During 2011 and 2013, working with our partners, now most of those principals being at Carollo Engineering, did the AOP design and construction with the blessing of mayor and council. And we finished that new facility in 2014, in January 2014. So this is the TARP new advanced oxidation plant. It is hydrogen peroxide as the oxidant and UV destruction with granular activated carbon as the quenching element at the end of the process, which we could have chosen a couple different quenching agents to be at the end of the process. Thankfully, we chose GAC, and for good reason. And I'll explain that in a moment. So just a schematic on how TARP is laid out. You have a north and south well field. Hopefully you can see my cursor. We just added a new well, though it's not plumbed into the collection system yet, but will be operational in about a year. That goes to feed pumps to the new plant, hydrogen peroxide, UV, and then the GAC contactor, and then it leaves the facility. Here's a schematic of the original plant, which is now actively bypassed as of about 3 or 4 months ago. Originally, we had to run the water through here because this is the plant that's in the consent decree, but we have an agreement with EPA as a matter of just a few months ago that we can run directly passing the old plant and going directly to the distribution system. And that brings us to the PFAS history at the TARP facility. Where I was getting to before Wi-Fi collapsed on me in the middle of my talk is prior to 2009, there was an EPA health advisory or around 2009, there was EPA health advisory for 400 part per trillion and 200 part per trillion for PFOA and PFOS respectively. And we were doing what was called, as I was telling the story about the original work of USGS on the Santa Cruz River and then the aquifer near the Santa Cruz River, Tucson Water started doing its own unregulated contaminant monitoring by the end of 2000. And part of the suite that we did included a couple of these perfluorinated compounds, and we found them in the system. Where we found them were along the Santa Cruz River. We were mimicking much of the same areas where we saw where it had most likely human intervention into the aquifer system that would have caused that, could potentially introduce contaminants in the area. And that's how our sampling program was created. And we did detect PFOA and PFOS in wells, some of those wells in Marana, and you'll see a map in a little bit where Tucson Water serves. But they were low level detections, and they were more curiosity. They were nowhere near the 200 or 400 part per trillion that you see here as the health advisory. They're much lower. They're in the 40 to 70 range, if I recall. And we were just like, what are these? These are interesting. Have no idea what this is. But we kept track of it, and we continued to find them throughout the area. And then we started to expand some of our sampling. Well, by 2013, 2014, we added some of the TARP wells to that sampling protocol, and it was around this time that the detection limits that were originally created for PFOA and PFOS in particular were lowered, and all of a sudden we started to see some small detections in the TARP facility. Going back to the previous slides, though, we added GAC. This was around the same time the new advanced oxidation plant started, and GAC, being our quenching agent, also happens to be a very good absorption media for perfluorinated compounds. So we had no noticeable detections in our distribution system still. During those years, we continued to monitor, and then by May 16th, 2016, at approximately 10 a.m. Pacific time, when I got the AWWA alert that the EPA changed the health advisory for PFOA and PFOS to 70 part per trillion, I was at a meeting at the town of Marana, and I walked up to our town manager at the time, showed him my phone, and said, "We might have a problem." And the rest is kind of history from there. Tucson Water then notified myself and Scott, when we were at Marana at the time, that they had detections in the Marana area that now were close to exceeding that 70 part per trillion, or did exceed it. And so Marana did not have an unregulated sampling program at the time, so we immediately started sampling up there. At the same time, Tucson Water started sampling all of its distribution wells across the system, trying to identify where we're finding perfluorinated compounds, and particularly where are we finding them at the 70 part per trillion level. So during these years, we started to notice that the wells at the TARP facility started to increase in PFAS and PFAS impact, which isn't good. Thankfully, we were sequestering it at TARP with the GAC compounds that were out there. And then in 2019, like I mentioned, we created internal standards based on what we decided to do. Told mayor and council, informed the community, and they agreed with our very conservative operational target for PFAS as we continue to study this item further. Now, moving forward past 2019 with our operational targets, we have many wells off. I think we're up to 24 wells. I have a map coming up on that, on where we're seeing our PFAS compounds throughout the city of Tucson system. But at the same time, we now were triggering at TARP. It is triggering the change out of our GAC facility, our granular activated carbon, much quicker than what was originally thought of when it was just for destruction of hydrogen peroxide. Now it's actually a treatment item that's absorbing perfluorinated compounds, and that's how it's being managed. And during this time frame, an expansion of TARP was also floated out there to add in a 10th well to help accelerate the cleanup of TCE. And that also means that we would have to expand the TARP facility. So there's a lot of things that are happening now in the last several years. I mentioned GAC changeout. It was originally designed for hydrogen peroxide quenching. Now it is used for perfluorinated compound absorption. We had to add additional 4,000 pounds of media to each vessel to increase the empty bed contact time to ensure that perfluorinated compounds were absorbed. We started doing weekly sampling to ensure the community and mayor and council that the TARP facility would not be passing on any perfluorinated compounds into the Tucson water distribution system. What we're finding out is a shorter chain species. I mentioned that besides the two that have a health advisory, there's several others that we're seeing in the chemical soup that's out there. Some of those are shorter, and some of those are coming through the carbon quicker than others. The one that comes through quicker than others is PFHXS. Currently using bituminous coal-based GAC, and we've had 3 changeouts during this late 18 and early 19. We've had another changeout in September 19 to early January 2020, and then we just recently had a changeout of all current 8 vessels in August of 2021 while we're working on the expansion of the facility. Just to show you what kind of levels we're seeing, these are for the, we call them the famous 4, the ones that we use the combined 18 part per trillion. On the left here, you have the AOP raw water of what's coming into TARP is averaging around 62.2 for those 4. Once it gets through the plant, it's non-detect, and then we verify in the distribution system at Santa Cruz Lane Reservoir that it is still non-detect. So from a drinking water perspective, we are still very good for that. But jumping over to the potable system, TARP is not the only place where we have perfluorinated compounds, and this goes back to the studies that were started 20 years ago, and then the health advisory changing in 2009, which changed the Tucson water sampling plan, and then the notification by 2016 of all the partners, water utilities in the areas, particularly Tucson Water and Marana Water, who are close to the Santa Cruz River, of the likelihood of perfluorinated compounds now above the health advisory. So this is the Tucson water map, and here's TARP. Hopefully you can see my cursor down here. We don't have, and these are wells that are on or out of service. Well, the TARP wells are on because there's a current active treatment plant, but there's some other wells that contribute to the distribution system that have had to been turned off or put on standby based on detectable limits. If I go downriver from the two wastewater treatment plants, these are the Tucson water wells located in the Ina I-10 area, as well as the Continental Ranch area of town of Marana, where Tucson Water serves. Also, if you can recall Scott's map starts around this area and continues to the north into the Marana systems. So there's Marana water wells intermixed with these Tucson water wells. Again, everything is within close proximity as the crow flies to the Santa Cruz River. So knowing that as a conduit for where these compounds are coming from. Anything that happened in Tucson or ended up either in the stormwater system or ended up in the wastewater stream is what's being detected on the northwest side and giving the two utilities the troubles that we're seeing. Another interesting thing, we have this area right here that's open in the map. This is the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. We have a series of wells outside of Davis-Monthan that have been turned off because of high levels of detected perfluorinated compounds. We also have a series of monitor wells, and there'll be a map coming up showing what some of those levels are, and that is a current focus of ADEQ working in the region to try to explain what's happening here on that. Let me go to the next slide. Now here's a up close of what's going on at the north end of Davis-Monthan. Davis-Monthan and the Air Force Civil Engineering Center has been studying the base, actions that have been happening at the base, whether it was training facilities for the AFFF, the aqueous film forming foams that are used to put out airplane fires and fuel fires, which is a common theme globally of where perfluorinated compounds are being seen. The washes from the base come off the north end of the base, and you can see that this is a sample collected at the fence line on the Air Force side in the aquifer is at 14,000 part per trillion of the four perfluorinated compounds. 900 here, 952. Some of these other wells now are City of Tucson wells that have been shut off. 283 and heading towards Randolph Park, we have detections, but we also have detections going to the west along the airport wash area, and then in the corner here is where TARP ends up, and you can see the Santa Cruz River joining here. So there's a combination of two sources that are being looked at. The one source is direct point source at the base from the fire foam training facilities that are impacted the aquifer and the storm sewer conveyance system that goes from the base and to the west through the airport wash and then into the Santa Cruz. And from the Santa Cruz, it flows north into the rest of the city of Tucson and the town of Marana. But also we have people at the base who have verified that when there's also two ways that there's a point source discharge to the wastewater system. One of them is when there's heavy rains or monsoons that flood the foaming, the training facility where the foam is used for 40 or 50 years, that would overflow and then many times would intercept a sewer manhole there, which ended up in the Pima County system, short-circuiting the city and ending up at Agua Nueva. And also, if there was any floor drains in any of the hangars present and they used foam inside of a hangar, it was rinsed down the drain. So a combination of areas where potential exposures are happening. The Department of Defense is actively looking at this site, came up with an initial investigation of this site. identifying that these wash areas are of high concern for them, and there will be further activities taking place there. In addition, I heard Scott talking about how we've engaged with ADEQ, and now ADEQ and through the governor's office have committed, at least for this area, not on the northwest side as of yet, other than doing some data collection from the two water agencies. But starting this week, ADEQ and their contractors are starting to drill and do their own aquifer testing off base. So ADEQ and the state is taking the lead in that. Tucson Water is supporting that activity. The governor has identified $3 million in this fiscal year for these efforts because this part is the greatest concern for the city of Tucson and Tucson Water. Up here, you see all these blue dots. That is the Tucson Water Central well field. When we cannot recover our water from Avra Valley and move it into the city, where we store our CAP water in Avra Valley, for those of you who don't know, and majority of that water is brought into the city past the Star Pass area through the Clearwell Reservoir. When we cannot operate that system, the central Tucson water system is the backup supply for the city of Tucson. We have a plume of perfluorinated compound leaving Davis Mountain, taking out several wells and continuing to head towards the central well field of the city of Tucson. And that is why ADEQ, in cooperation with the governor's office, is quickly focusing on this area to stop this migration as quickly as possible, even ahead of the Department of Defense. We cannot wait for the federal government to do this. The state is doing this ahead of them. There's some other areas mentioned up in the Marana, South Marana area. We're in the Continental Reserve area and the Continental Ranch area for us. In those areas where we have several wells that are turned off, we've been evaluating, does it make sense for us to do centralized treatment there? We looked at this, we did this evaluation with Carollo. There's a potential. It would be highly costly. We are not moving forward with this item at this time, but we needed to do the analysis to see if this is a potential. There's nor the appetite or desire to do any more perfluorinated compound treatment to drinking water by the city of Tucson. We're trying to come up with other means to move water into our system or to move it around without having to go to either wellhead treatment or group centralized treatment like this map proposes. So even though it was evaluated, that is not on our current radar to do. I just want to make sure that's out there, but it is a potential, and if treatment technologies change to make it more affordable, amenable in the future, that might be something we might dust off and look at. But for the way we're doing it now, it is something we do not have an appetite for. Reclaimed water system, and this will be the last one, and then Scott and I can take some questions. I think we have plenty of time here. So I kind of mentioned that we believe there's been some point source discharges over the history of in Davis Mountain in particular that short-circuited through the sewer system, through the Pima County sewer system, and ended up at the old Roger Road plant or the current Agua Nueva plant, neither of which were ever designed to handle compounds like perfluorinated compounds. And that automatically means then the city of Tucson's reclaimed water system, which has been around since 1983, we have discovered is highly impacted with perfluorinated compounds. A little background on our system. It's diverse. It covers the majority of the Tucson metro area. You can see pipelines, Dove Mountain in the town of Marana to the north, all the way to the far east, far south, Star Pass, and all points. Majority of our usage is for golf courses. I believe 18 golf courses have connections to the system, as well as the town of Oro Valley. I forgot there's actually a pipeline that goes to Oro Valley. Most of the city parks and county parks are on the reclaimed water system as well for turf irrigation, as well as several other accounts out there, including 409, or including a whole group of residential customers in the Savano neighborhood and Tucson Country Club neighborhood that use it as well. System, like I mentioned, is large, over 1,000 customers together. In the summertime, we can move as much as 30 MGD to meet the needs of the people out there. So here we go. Sweetwater Reclamation Facility, which is the the base for the City of Tucson's reclaimed water system is located right here. You can see the basins here. The old Roger Road plant is across the street. The new Agua Nueva plant is to the north of there now. City of Tucson, for those of you who don't know, take secondary treated effluent from Pima County, do tertiary treatment either through a filtration plant or through soil aquifer treatment in these basins, recover that water, put it to the City of Tucson's reclaimed water system, and deliver it to all those customers identified before. Well, we start doing sampling for perfluorinated compounds in and around this area where water has been stored since the early 80s, and you can see the perfluorinated compound numbers throughout these areas are high. And it's high emanating here at Sweetwater. It becomes a lot less when you go upriver from here. So a point source of the wastewater system and the reclaimed water system in this aquifer area is pretty much all but 99.9% is where it was coming from. So we're currently running the reclaimed water system to keep PFAS compounds, particularly PFOA and PFOS, as low as possible. What we see coming out of Agua Nueva when samples are taken there is generally less than 20 part per trillion, or even less than that most of the time. However, this historical groundwater, which we have to use to meet our demands, is well above that. At the same time, last year, Silver Bell Landfill created a remediation project for the landfill to deal with some PCE, I believe, and the disposal of the water, treated water from there, was to go into the Tucson Water Reclaim Water System. So they ended up choosing a treatment process that used granular activated carbon. And so we take about 1 to 1.5 million gallons a day when the treatment plant is operating and put it into the city's reclamation system that helps treat for this area down here. And that reduces some of the reduces the PFAS levels, as well as the daily what we receive from Agua Nueva. So then now we are pumping our groundwater wells that are highly impacted as least amount as possible, when the prior 40 years it was as much as possible. So we've had to change our whole operational scheme on the reclaimed water system. This is a lot of information. Apologize for the disruption in technology at the beginning, but I think we're at the point where Scott and I can take some questions. I believe we have about 20 minutes left in this presentation. So thank you.
Great, thank you, John. I'm checking the chat if anyone has questions. Barbara had one earlier and Scott answered it in the chat. So if anyone didn't see that, she was asking about DW wells in total. Have they had to shut down? And Scott said just one. So, okay, here comes some more questions. All right, so blending with reclaimed should be lowering the PPT of PFs. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong.
I think that question's for me, and
Okay.
I see it's from Laura. Yeah, so like I mentioned on the last slide, so bringing in water directly from Agua Nueva, which doesn't have a high concentration of perfluorinated compounds, at least it shouldn't, because of the restrictions done by the Air Force and others, as well as using the water directly from the Silver Bell landfill, which is treated through GAC, is giving us a very low reclaimed water quality with regard to perfluorinated compounds. However, during the peak summer months, when we have to run the extraction wells for the water that's been stored at the Sweetwater facility, which is high, then we go above the 70 part per trillion for PFOA and PFOS during those 3 to 4 months of time frame. But for the other 8 months of the year, when demand is low, we're able to keep it at least below the health advisory. Just using the health advisory as the target. Nobody is drinking from the reclaimed water system, but at the same time, we don't want to be distributing it all over the basin at levels that are too high.
Okay. And then I think you can see the chat, but from Jeremy, he said, great presentation. And it was. Thank you so much, both of you. And he's asking, is TARP GAC change out related to PFAS?
Absolutely. The initial design for the AOP plant, where it was the GAC was just to treat the residual hydrogen peroxide. Now it is treating for perfluorinated compounds. The quenching of the hydrogen peroxide that GAC should have lasted for years, if not decades. But because we're now doing perfluorinated absorption with the GAC, we're probably going to have to do full change out at the cost of $400,000 to $500,000 per change out every 6 to 8 months. So not good.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. And last call. Oh, okay. Follow-up, was the GAC PFAS relationship known or learned as part of TARP?
The PFAS relationship at TARP was serendipity at its finest. We did not build the original AOP plant with the idea that we would be eventually treating for PFAS. Thankfully, we selected that quenching method because it was providing that treatment for us as PFAS compounds started to move into the TARP plume area.
Okay. All right. I had already said last call, so I'm guessing, and I don't see anyone typing, so I think we're good. Just a reminder, your PDHs will be emailed out to the email that you registered with. You can also log in to see your PDH certificates after the fact in your AZ Water account for events going forward from around September this year. If you have any questions, you can email me at staff@azwater.org. Thank you again to our Luncheon committee. Our Phoenix and Tucson Luncheon committees have joined forces this year to present monthly topics. And our next one is in, Kirsten, is it November or is it early December?
It's December 3rd.
I was going to say, I feel like it's the first week of December. Okay, so yeah, so we'll be back in December. So please register at azwater.org and continue to follow us on social media for other opportunities for PDHs and to get involved with AZ Water. And thank you guys so much for joining and have a great day.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you.